First thing I thought was the boy that cried wolf. They know how to deal with this young child. This is what they're doing. They're dealing with it. He ain't going anywhere. It's BS, man. You've got to call BS. He's not the fighter he was.
You will get decent matches at a lower level as well.
This will be the situation where the best fight the best.
I think there's a ceiling boxing. I don't think it can go anywhere near the scale that football's got.
You are going to get the old school trying to resist it from happening because there's too many people benefiting. My first professional fight, I got paid £190.
It was back in 1903 though, mate.
We saw Joe Joyce drop Joseph Parker. We've seen Zilly Zhang, despite the fact that we give a lot of credit to that fight, and Dillian White. Yeah. Whereas I think Dubois is so sharp and so powerful and so strong in his own belief now. I think he'll land on Parker. He gets cleaned out by Bakole. He's got nowhere to go.
That is a fight that AJ, his team, and Eddie will not want to do.
Welcome to episode 104 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. Today we're joined by one of the best voices in boxing and the former cruiserweight champion of the world, Johnny Nelson. Nice to see you both.
How are you, sir? You well?
I'm okay. Anyway, listen, an interesting dynamic that happened last week. Turki Alalshikh phoned into the talkSPORT show that I do with Jim White and talked about a variety of things, including obviously the subject matter of Tyson Fury. But I want to start with a different subject. Let's hear what he had to say first about that. How are you finding the boxing industry? I mean, you've got a very focused mindset. You have very clear agendas of what you want to achieve for your country and what your population demographics look like. How are you finding the landscape of boxing and all the different factions of it? The fighters, the promoters, the governing bodies.
It is very big headache, and Frank can understand. It is very big headache, but it is useful for us now. A lot of people knowing about the Riyadh season through the boxing and what we are doing in the boxing, and now in the middle to announce nearly what I say to you from the beginning, the ideas of the league.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You had mentioned that before. A US league and a UK league, would that be right? Fighters fighting in each.
Yeah, we will start with the US and let's see from there what is happening. Now also at the same time, we are discussing with Queensberry and Matchroom to have a different level of relationship. I cannot say any more, but Frank and the people in Matchroom also can understand what I mean.
Without wanting to disappear into the sycophantic gang, you can't help but find yourself quite liking Turki Alalshikh because he's so enthusiastic about things. What do you make? I like this idea of boxing leagues. I think it brings a different dynamic to the sport, a different format. And I think format creation in media, in business and in sport is the holy grail of commercial opportunity. If it can create tribalism, if it can create an empathy like supporting something more than just an individual fighter. What do you think of the idea of boxing leagues, boys?
Well, I think you've got to understand the logistics of it a little bit more, because a boxing league, I think I love change and I love that idea of it because you know that you'll be getting the best bucks and the best. You won't have the traditional route of getting the big prospect, the Olympic gold medalist going 10-0, but not really boxing anyone, only boxing the journeyman and trying to build up a record like that. I think that by doing the league, it will set them in and you will get decent matches at a lower level as well. And so I think it's very interesting and I think it could work. I just need to understand the logistics a little bit more.
So, and I think doing a league, it gives people like me a chance to get to the top, because my first professional fight, I got paid £190. And so
you're overpaid.
Overpaid.
It was back in 1903 though, mate, to be fair.
So looking at my amateur record, then turning professional, I wouldn't have stood a chance, getting on all this. But creating a league gives me a chance to climb up to the top and make my way through. It organises it. I actually like the fact that Turkey's he's like a fanboy. He's phoning up the show. Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? When would you ever get, maybe as recently they might have got it, but when would you ever get a Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn bringing up wanting to put their 10 pence worth in their show? So he's passionate about it. I think having a league is creating some kind of organised status where people know where they are, people know what they can follow, people know what to expect, when to expect it. Unfortunately, it's been like the Wild Wild West boxing.
For a long time.
For a very, very long time, to the point where it was dominated by people that didn't do our sport any favours. Now, it's, as opposed to sport, a business disguised as a sport. I think now what Turkey's doing, he's creating a structure for the fans to get what the fans need and they deserve.
And of course, a structure that's something that the Gulf states can own and ultimately use for their own benefit, which is ultimately creating entertainment value in their own country and own a particular sport. If they try to do that in football and other spaces, they might find more resistance because the structures are more set in stone. What do you think, when we talk about boxing leagues and we talk about this idea, what do you think the reaction is going to be from the current orthodoxy, the promoters, the governing bodies? How do you think that's going to play into their world?
Trust me, you are going to get the old school trying to resist it from happening because there's too many people benefiting from the status quo now.
Like who?
There's too many promoters benefiting. I've just changed my language. Promoters benefiting from the situation right now, and they're getting away with things that probably we're not privy to. This makes it organised, makes people be accountable for what they do, who they put in. The fighters are more accountable and have more transparency about what's coming in and what's going out, and that's why these guys will put resistance.
And I think by creating these leagues as well, you're going to get these fights that are much more evenly matched. You know, where you go in there and they're working their way through, obviously, to get to that higher level, move through the divisions. But ultimately, the fans win because you're going to get even.
Well, that's my next question. When you talk about benefits, we can see that by putting a structure in place, by being the creator of a format, and then ultimately perhaps the governance of it, we can see why the Saudis will do this because it puts order and rhyme and reason into what they're currently doing. We can see perhaps the benefit to the fighters. So the case that you just alluded to, where you as a fighter will see opportunities and see the opportunity to grow quicker. How do we see the benefit for fans?
The best will fight the best. How many times? Right now, what's happening right now? Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua. How long have they been talking about this fight? How close has it been to coming? And that's just one fight. In our sport, how often is fighter A not fought fighter B? It's not like MMA and stuff like that. So now, this will be the situation where the best fight the best, will earn their position. The best fight the best, and that's how the fans will benefit.
But how do can you? Sorry, Spencer, because I want to pick up what Johnny's talking about there. Because when we talk about leagues, we normally talk about regular fixtures, regular ability. If you've got the Darts Premier League, you can see them playing, right? Because the physicality of darts is very different. Football is set up the way it's set up. Can you literally see a situation where a boxing league facilitates fighters fighting on a regular basis, almost like a campaign, a football season or a season of... I mean, how does that work out for you boys? You can't go into the ring more than 4 or 5 times a year, can you?
No, I think that how it works out is that obviously that they're well evenly matched, and that's where the divisions, that's where the leagues come in. And I think that the regularity of fights, where the fighters are trying to get, because they can do that. They'll you know, at the lower levels, they can be boxing 5, 6, 7 times a year, and as they're trying to move up to that higher level.
But I get that. But if you want something to be successful, you're going to need the stellar names to be within the confines of it. So if you're talking about it as an engine room, an incubator for the lesser fighters whilst they're building their careers to become more valuable, I get that. But in order for it to be a commercial proposition, because the way it will be successful is be broadcasted, and the broadcasters will want it. So you're going to have the star names attached to it. And then how are you going to get the star names to do what younger fighters might be prepared to do, which is fight 5 or 6 times a year?
Yeah. So the young fighters would probably fight, if you're talking 6 times a year, that's like twice, once every 2 months. The stellar names could easily fight 3, if not 4 times a year. Their job is to box. Their job is not to box and say and go on a holiday for a year and live the life. That's their job. That's why they get paid so much. That's where they're the stellar names. So it creates structure for the fighters, something to focus on and look forward to, and think, right, this is what I do. Because remember, a lot of fighters have to subsidise their living elsewhere. He works at Wimpy or whatever.
Yeah.
So therefore, it gives them structure for the stellar fighters, the ones that will probably try and play a bit of monopoly with their career to a certain point. It makes them stand by saying, you've got to fight at least 3 times a year, if not 4 times a year, because you're a top dog fighter. Look at the heyday of Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Mike Tyson. Back in the day when they got built up and they were fighting regular, that's when they got the fan base coming. Next minute, these guys are fighting once a year.
The major obstacle, I think, to overcome here is the governing bodies. How do they work that into this league and this system? Obviously, with the champions, you've got different champions at the same weight division. How do they manufacture that into this league?
Well, this is the question that is interesting, because it's one thing looking at the boxing league and looking at the landscape and looking at the broadcasters and looking at the need for change and the evolvement of the sport. And I think it's great to have out-of-the-box thinking. For me, it's interesting to see how it's going to develop, because there's one side of things, which is how many times they can fight. There's another side of things, which how interesting it will be to the broadcasters and how much they're prepared to pay for this, because that will be the driving factor. Because there's going to come a point somewhere along the line where the Saudis are going to sit back from this sport and say, it's not all about what we're prepared to inject into it economically, because right now there is no governance over what they're prepared to put in. They're not making it a commercial decision. They're not suggesting that actually it needs to pay for itself. It needs to wipe its mouth. They're basically saying this is all seed capital. We're going to put a lot of money behind this sport. We're using it to create influence. And one question that I have is, how big, because I think that Turki Alalshikh thinks this is a significant sport that can get a lot of eyes on the prize. And I, without wanting to be negative and piss on the parade of it, I think there's a ceiling to boxing. I don't think it can go anywhere near the scale that football's got.
I'm not sure,
and
Simon.
I'm curious to see how big you think boxing can become if you start changing the formats, if you start making it more available through different broadcasters, and you start making it a regular staple diet with league bases attached to it. Do you think boxing has got the scale really? You do.
I do.
You do
because it's like football. If you support a team that wear red and the player's got a number on his back, you can fall in love with a player. You want to follow his progress, and you've created consistency. You've created a family to be able to say, we're going to watch this team play every week. You've created a habit that can be created. Unfortunately, in boxing, because these fighters might fight once a year, or they might fight today, and you don't know when
you
it's
don't
going
build
to
an
be.
affinity
You're
with
not
them.
going to be able to build that fan base up, and doing this helps
gives
build
it a
the fan
chance.
base up.
Yeah.
So the opportunities are limitless, because boxing we stood the test of time. We've been around forever and a day. The problem is that it's the business that ruins the show.
But I think the business has taken a lot of fans away from boxing over the years,
Or
and
the
that's
lack
been
of
the
it.
big problem. Yeah, or the lack of it. Exactly, the
Yeah.
politics that got in the
It's just
way.
interesting, before we move on to a different topic, he talked about a different relationship with Queensberry and Matchroom. You got any idea what that might mean?
Well, without getting sued.
No. Maybe more involvement. At
More
some
governance.
Point. Yeah,
He's
absolutely.
probably talking about more governance.
Absolutely.
These guys have lived by their own rules.
I thought George Warren was going to go and run it for them or whatever.
These guys have
knows?
lived by their own rules. So therefore, he's saying, listen, these are the rules we're playing by. Those cowboy days are over. The Wild West is gone. This is what he's talking about. And anybody with any common sense knows that's what he's talking about.
Well, we'll see. So, boys, the news broke last week. It broke on this show, actually, that Tyson Fury has decided to retire. And whilst my immediate response is, who cares? And then, if he has, up and onward we go. What was your reaction, Johnny, to that? Do you subscribe to the view that A, we should be talking about it endlessly and giving him the attention that he wants, and B, that we should be desperately pining for him to come back in, and C, is he actually going to come back in?
Well, I think he wanted B for us all desperately pining for him to come back and say, no, please don't do it. First thing I thought was the boy that cried wolf. Second thing, it reminded me of when I ran away from home twice and got to the end of the street. My mum said, yeah, go on, crack on, go. She knows I'm going anywhere. And that's how Frank and that's how Eddie's response and everybody else's and Spencer Brown's response to him saying that, they've said, yeah, well, good on him. They know how to deal with this young child. This is what they're doing. They're dealing with him. He ain't going anywhere because there is far too much money on the table for him to walk away from the AJ fight, number one. Number two, today I'm retired, I'm done. The day after, I want $500 million. So he's not even playing a good game of poker. You know it's about trying to up the price. And I think Eddie, love him or loathe him, predicted that weeks before. So I don't believe him.
Yeah, I mean, put aside whether we believe him or not, and we think he's pulling the strings of people that are probably quite bright about how to deal with the situation, knowing that ultimately there's enough money on the table to draw him back, irrespective of what he does and doesn't want. When you look back at his legacy, because a lot of people talked, I had a bit of a debate with Frank Warren the other day about his legacy, and Frank doesn't listen. He only listens to what he wants to say. I think there's no doubt that Tyson Fury has a legacy, but when you look back on it, given the fact that in the last year, we look at, or 18 months, we look at Fury fighting Derek Chisora, Dillian Whyte. I mean, the mandatory with Dillian Whyte is not his problem. It's not his, it's not his fault. But then Ngannou, and then of course 2 losses over Usyk in the last couple of years. When you look back at his legacy, Johnny, what do you think? Because he was a person that described himself as a generational great, the heavyweight of all heavyweights, and here we are now, looking at him perhaps slightly differently.
Okay, I'll kind of go around the house on this. When Tony Belly boxed David Haye, he came out of a line and said his legs have gone. He's not the fighter he was. He's hustling you all. He saw something that the public didn't see until the fight came out. Tyson Fury is that fighter. Tyson Fury fought the best of what was around for him, but the latter part of his career, which is now, he's managing to hustle his way through thinking, you know what, he's not the fighter he was. And anybody that's got any honesty about them knows this Tyson Fury over the last 2 years, he ain't the fighter that he was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So therefore, there's certain fights he can do, certain fights he can get away with, certain things he can do, because he's that good. Because he was that good. He's not the fighter he was. But the standard of opposition, he's making sure he's going to navigate his way around where he makes sure I can beat that one, I can do that, I can do as little work as possible. The time when he's had to turn back time and do what he's shown he's capable of doing was when he got in with Usyk. And that showed the test of time has caught up on him. He's got away with the for the past.
Do you think
3
he
years.
genuinely believed he could beat Usyk when he stepped in against him?
I think the first time he did, the second time he didn't.
Right.
And the thing is, he had it back to front. The first time, if he had the same intensity, attitude, headspace in the second fight, he had that in the first fight, I think he'd have done him. I put money on it for him to win.
I sort of disagree with that.
Yeah, but the second fight, because he was scarred by the first fight, he threw 6 instinctive shots. Just 6.
But I believe...
And that means he was thinking about every shot he threw.
But Johnny, I believe he thought that he could win that fight for sure. Well, going into that one, he didn't mentally think like going in there. I think that he, by making those adjustments, coming in heavier, he thought, this is the way that I do it. I sort of use my weight and advantage. It didn't work to his...
Look at what he did. There was no instinctive
shots. I do believe
shots.
he believed he could win the fight.
Yeah, in his head. But how he fought, he had to. He thought about every shot. You look at a vintage version of Tyson Fury. He's knocked people out with an instinctive shot. Boom, boom. Let the shots go. And it got to the point where he did exactly what AJ did in the second fight.
Worried what
he
Usyk's
thought
doing.
about it, thinking, what should I do? I know he's capable of this. And if that ignorance, if he had that ignorance in that in the first fight, but the same intensity in the first fight, he'd have got the win.
Well, I think when the fighter gets older, though, like if you go back, I mean, we haven't even mentioned Tyson Fury's victory over Klitschko in Germany. I mean, what an achievement that was.
Well,
that
opened it up for everybody else, didn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, and that gets overshadowed a lot in his career. And you look at those trilogy with Wilder as well. You've got to accept that he is one of the generational greats of today for sure. He's lost to Usyk and Usyk only.
Absolutely.
But as you get older, your mindset, Johnny, you will know this better than anyone, but your mind changes. Like we start thinking a little bit more. It's not instinctive. You think, and when you get to that level, like Usyk is a similar age to him as well, but he doesn't think like that. He still thinks instinctively. And I think for Fury, maybe that seed of doubt creeping in just makes him think, and it's that split second is too long.
Yeah. Well, with Fury, whether he's playing hide and seek with himself or whether he has genuinely retired, and I think we all have formed a view that it's probably likely he's going to come back in. But right now, it leaves one person potentially in the lurch who's made his position quite clear, which is Anthony Joshua. When I was talking to Turki Alalshikh, he had some comments to make about Joshua. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
I want to see Joshua and Wilder now. If Tyson is not available, why not Joshua and Wilder?
Great fight.
Joshua against Wilder. Simon's alongside me, Your Excellency. What do you think of that? Anthony Joshua against Deontay Wilder. He's saying he would like to see that. Would you?
I can understand why people would want to see it. I mean, I'd like to see Joshua fight someone like Bakole. I think there's real jeopardy in that fight. I know we've got a bet on that, Spencer, and I don't want to lose that bet. But I'd like to see Joshua fighting someone that was at the front of their career. Potentially.
Yeah, can I answer, Simon?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we finished the deal with Bakole against the Nigerian fighters, Gogba or something like this.
Ajogba, yeah.
Ajogba, yes, we finished it. They must do it because it is mandatory for the IBF.
For the IBF, yeah.
Then, after that, we are open to see Joshua also against Bakole. I want to see this fight, right? I want to see it, but you know where I want to see it?
In Africa.
I want to see it in Africa, yeah.
Right, Johnny, given the fact I did my very best to throw Anthony Joshua under the bus with Bakole, and I saw your reaction when I mentioned that, what's your view on Joshua fighting Bakole?
risk reward, it doesn't weigh up. I don't care what AJ or Eddie's saying. The risk is far too high. The reward is far too low. And even though they're saying we'll take it here, whoever Anthony Joshua boxes, if they're still hoping upon hope of this fight with Tyson Fury that comes to fruition, he needs to be mindful and careful who they
Johnny, the landscape has changed though. When we're talking about it, we're now talking about Riyadh season, Turki Alalshikh.
Turkey wants it.
And if he wants it and he wants to recreate something that happened in Africa many years ago, what was it? How many years ago? 35, 40 years ago? Rumble in the Jungle. They're going to go to the same arena, and that was the last fight that they had.
And
there.
I don't disagree with you.
And he's talking about that. Bakole would fit the bill for that.
And Bakole
of course he would.
But I don't disagree with you. But I'm telling you now, that is a fight that AJ, his team, and Eddie will not want to do. Yeah. If they've got to do it because Turkey's doing it, they're going to be dragging their feet, mate. But I'm telling you now, when I saw that showmance of them doing their head-to-head at the ringside event, I thought it doesn't mean diddly.
But AJ has publicly said that he would have that fight with Bakole, and it's all about creating history and going back to the where that great fight happened.
Yeah, Spence,
I believe he'll do it.
If you're put a question to somebody, there's not going to be a boxer that's going to tell, I won't fight him.
Yeah.
But you would tell the different route. You talk like Deontay Wilder for Anthony Joshua right now. For me, is a given because Deontay Wilder is. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, so is Anthony Joshua, a shell of his former self, but Deontay Wilder has deteriorated seriously, and I don't think the fight is as nearly as good as it was.
But why do you think? I'm with Johnny, and that's why I put a bet with you last week, which you're going to pay out on, by the way, despite your best intentions to get out of it, which is all a camp of paying bets, right? But you seem to be adamant that this fight, it makes no sense to me. There's too much risk for Anthony Joshua. He gets cleaned out by Bakole. He's got nowhere to go.
Totally understand
nowhere
that.
to go.
Totally understand that, but at some point the fight has to happen, and that is the fight.
Well, it doesn't, does it?
Happens.
Why does it have to happen?
Why does it have to happen?
I've just got one question. Why has everybody forgot about Daniel Dubois? Why is nobody talking about, well, what about...
we're going to talk about him, don't worry about that.
Why is AJ not saying, or Eddie trying to push for that? Why all of a sudden that injury, what stopped the rematch straight away, is all of a sudden all right for fighting somebody else?
I agree. To make Johnny's point, it doesn't make any sense for him to fight Daniel Dubois because he knows he's got a challenge with that, or his team, I think Freddie Cunningham, those guys didn't want him in with that fight.
Where would you go if he was Anthony Joshua then? Where would you go next?
Well, you know where he's going to go.
I'm asking you, where would you do? If he was looking after him,
it depends what you want from it.
That's a weak answer.
No, it's not. I'll qualify the answer. Depends what you want from it. If your desire is to win a world title again, or if it's to get paid, if your desire is to get paid, right, then all roads lead to making sure that Fury's back in the ring with you, and that's what you're going to do. Yeah. If your desire is, I cannot live with the fact that I walked into an arena with 96,000 fans waiting to anoint me, and I got knocked on my arse and I got battered around a ring from round 1 to round 5, you're going to start picking fights that get you back to fight for a world title.
He also talked about his desire of creating history and going back to, relive history, like out in Africa. And he mentioned that is a fight that he would
but I think
take.
you're being sentimental.
Yeah, listen, I love AJ. Yeah. I love AJ, but you've got to call BS when it's BS, man.
Where do you think he goes?
You know what? Again, all roads lead to Tyson Fury. That's what it is. And he's got to think, whoever he boxes, looking at his past performance, you don't know which AJ is going to turn up. So there's a big risk. So even getting in with Wilder, even though Wilder looks as fragile as hell, there's a risk there. But he should take Wilder out. Right, so you've got to be smart and think, right, we've got to calculate this, because if you lose to anybody else, that rainbow's gone.
But if he goes in against Wilder, which is what Turki Alalshikh has indicated he wants to make, right? And we all know, when we listen to the conversations, we see Turki Alalshikh basically dictating to whoever he's talking to, whether it's Frank or Eddie, this is what happens, and off they scurry to make it happen. Right? I don't look at the Wilder fight. I think if Anthony Joshua were to go against Wilder and not deal with him and clean him out, I think it would be ridiculous. We've seen Zhilei Zhang do it. We've seen Joseph Parker do it. If Anthony Joshua can't do it, then there's nothing left of Anthony Joshua. But I don't see that fight as having the same appeal to me. Wilder is like Prince, the artist formerly known as Prince. This is the fighter formerly known as Deontay Wilder. And I don't want to be disrespectful because I totally agree with you, what you boys do.
I totally agree with you.
But you've got to call it for what it is. It isn't.
I totally agree with you. That's Wilder why I'm talking about Bakole over Wilder. I go, Wilder, I don't really want to see that fight. I went, but Bakole is obviously a challenge, and there's history with that as well. Anyway, now I'll put this one out to you both, yeah? Do we get Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury next? Is that a likely fight that could happen? Forget with Tyson Fury being momentarily retired.
Yeah, it is,
Yeah, it is.
I'm with that as well.
I don't believe Tyson Fury. I don't believe this showmance we're seeing with AJ wanting to fight Bakole, who's in the Who Needs Him club. Nobody's mentioned AJ fighting, doing the rematch with the IBF champion Dubois. So obviously, this is smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
Look, despite the fact I'm arguing against the boxing intellect across the table, I still believe that Daniel Dubois is the number 2 heavyweight in the world. He was on Fight Night on Saturday night. Let's have a listen to what he had to say himself.
What challenges does Joseph Parker bring you on February 22nd, Daniel?
Listen, he's a good challenge. He's fought everyone. He's been a world champion. But I'm just on a roll now, and I'm ready to get him out of my way and, smash him to pieces and do whatever it takes to win. I think I'm going to be too much, too strong, too hungry, and too fast. And I just want to, deal with his challenges, I think, as I should.
You've got Joseph Parker now in front of you. And therefore, when you talk about what could happen off the back of a Joseph Parker win, it becomes realistic to get back in the ring straight away off the back of that with Alexander Usyk and challenge for undisputed status. I mean, that would be remarkable to do that in 2025.
Yeah, it's great. What a turnaround I've had the last year, really. But, yeah, that would be the icing on the cake to go in there and take all the belts off of him, get through Parker, and that's what's next. I think that's what's next.
Johnny, I'm listening to the orthodoxy suggest to me that if Joseph Parker can take Daniel Dubois deep into the fight, he can potentially drown him in deep waters as the fight goes on. I personally think he's going to blast him out of there. With no disrespect to Joseph Parker, I think he's in great form, and I think he's a great fighter now. I think he's all the things that perhaps we made about him in the past observations. He didn't let his hands go since he's been with Andy Lee. All that's changed, and he's got really great victories under his belt in the last year or so. Zhilei Zhang, Deontay Wilder. Where are you on this fight? How do you think it's going to play out with the Dubois-Parker fight?
I think Parker is a clever boxer. Obviously a better boxer than a tougher boxer than Danny Dubois. I think he'll weather the storm of because sometimes you get fighters who are really good at messing you about, really good at surviving, just boxing on the back foot, and I think he'll drag the fight out long. There's no way he's going to knock Daniel out. I'd be very surprised if he did, but I think he beats him on points.
But he got dropped twice by Zhilei Zhang. Mm-hmm. Daniel Dubois hits harder than Zhilei Zhang, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
And time's better.
Yeah. I know he does. No, Daniel Dubois does. Daniel Dubois, he can punch like a mule kicks.
Yeah.
I've seen him in the gym, and Don Charles is doing an amazing job with Daniel Dubois, and he's brought the best out in him, bringing the best out in him. Daniel Dubois he's got an underrated, unbelievable jab. So, but Joseph Parker is schooled enough and smart enough and crafty enough to navigate his way around that. He needs a career best performance in this. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying this is an impossible ask for him. It's a very possible win for him.
But Daniel is going to land on him. I mean, and we saw Joe Joyce drop Joseph Parker and stop him. We've seen Zhilei Zhang, despite the fact that we give a lot of credit to that fight, and Dillian White. Yeah. Whereas I think Dubois is so sharp and so quick and so powerful and so strong in his own belief now. I think he'll land on Parker.
You touched on it there, Simon. It's strong on his own belief, and that's what's different about Daniel Dubois right now. And that is credit to Don Charles and what he's been working with him on his psychological side of things. He works on it with him day to day in the gym. I see that up close. And Daniel's like a reborn fighter, and that's why you've got to say his favourite going into that fight. But Parker
do you worry that he's getting ahead of himself, Johnny?
No.
Going in the ring against Usyk, Daniel is now going from being as quiet as a church mouse to singing like the choir and telling everyone what he is. So, I'm hungry.
That's a big plus for Daniel.
Yeah. So with Daniel, they've taken the muzzle off you go. Yeah. Daniel's, and I'll always say even to this day, Daniel cannot think in the ring. He can remember, but he can't think. Right. When I say can't think, when something happens inside in mid-fight, he's got to be able to remember. Right, this is what you're doing. You look at the corner. They've got to cheer. You've got to keep going forward no matter what. Really? Fighters instinctively know how to adjust, how to adapt. He's a great at remember, but he's not good at thinking in the ring. So if anything that he's not prepared for is happening, he's lost. He's lost. He's thinking, what shall I do? Look at the corner.
Right. But I think the
here?
apprenticeship that he had with obviously fighting Alexander Usyk and going in there and Joe Joyce when the first loss that he had, you look at that and you go, he's taken that away and he's learned from that. Like I say, I see him up close in the gym and he's a different animal now to what he was even 6 months ago. And I think that's a massive plus for him. And I agree with you, Simon. I think that, listen, Daniel Dubois could come out on top of all these heavyweights right now and stay there for a long time.
Self-belief is everything for Daniel Dubois. And the more he believes in himself, this style that he has, it suits a young man. And so he's capitalising on it now because he believes in it. But as soon as that bubble's burst, because he's getting to that crest, you to think, I can do this, it can be everybody. But as soon as someone finds a way to actually burst that bubble,
someone's kryptonite to him. Talking about young men, Moses Itauma. A lot of noise. I was interested, I listened to you in your observations of him, and you were a tad critical of him in the fight, I thought, against Dempsey McKean. I think you called it naive. And you weren't as gushing with praise as I thought you might be, because I mean, he cleaned out a fighter that had done 12 rounds or near as damn it 12 rounds with Hrgovic, and was just, built to be durable and was cleaned out by Itauma in 1 round, less than 1 round.
When I say naive, I need naive in the risk he's taken in mid-fight. Sometimes I'll go to throw a shot and you think, wow, if he just doesn't know the danger of that shot. Naive, you know what, it's a compliment, because that naivety it makes him the fighter he is. I think potentially he will be at the top of the landscape of the heavyweight division, this young man here. And so right now he's going through a stage of naivety and he's getting away with it. And so when time comes and someone checks him on that, hopefully he's had enough experience to think, right, then I've learned from that lesson there. I love his naivety. It makes him dangerous.
Is it any difference from the sort of lazy parallel that's drawn with him because of his style with Mike Tyson? Would you have said back in the day when you were watching Mike Tyson throwing bombs left, right and centre that he was naive?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Right.
And I think the styles are similar but different. But it's the mindset and the chances that you think, oh my God, you really have done that shot.
Yeah, but
it's like standing in front of someone and leading with a backhand, and you think you actually did that. It's something you don't do.
But that fighting with your heart on your sleeve like that and that risk taking is what makes you exciting, and that's why you compare it to a young Mike Tyson.
Absolutely.
You look in his early days, you think, wow, he's coming forward, he's letting those shots go,
chin in the air. That's right.
You're really taking that gamble, but that's all in experience, and I think that's why.
Do you think, Johnny, that he should be fast-tracked into a world title shot this year if it's available?
No, because that's how you ruin potential greatness. I think matchmaking is important as in any fight.
Which Frank is brilliant at.
Exactly, and you've got to give that to Frank no matter what, because he's got to fight all shapes and sizes. A spoiler, tall, powerful, a boxer. He's got to get him all those, because when it counts and when you're up at the top, you've got to be prepared to fight everybody. Like that. So I think Frank's very good at ignoring the pressures of the public and going at his own pace.
I had that conversation with Frank out in Saudi last time we were out there, actually, and he said exactly the same. It's not that I don't think he could beat an Anthony Joshua right now, but we beat him.
Not the right time.
And where does that leave us? He said, it leaves us right up there, and I want this kid, because we've got something very special.
But also for the kid himself, he doesn't know what he doesn't know yet.
No. But I mean, this is one that I brought up, and I just thought, you know what? This is a fight I think we can make. And you're looking at like a Kubrat Pulev, WBA regular. I spoke to Kubrat out there actually as well. And he said, he's looking at these big fights and he go, well, if Moses is trying to crack these records of May the 19th, Mike Tyson's the youngest heavyweight champion, that qualifies him, surely. Kubrat Pulev is a good fight for him.
Matchmaking is everything, and don't be surprised if that's actually on the agenda. You get in there with these ex-fighters that have boxed your AJs and your Furies and putting him in there to say, right.
I'd like to see him in, before we pivot off, I'd like to see him with someone like Otto Wallim, because I think he's a clever fighter. I think he's a sort of like James Bone Crusher Smith was to Mike Tyson. He's going to make the fight difficult for Itauma to operate the way he's been operating with other fighters. It'll be interesting, but I do think, like you, I think we've got a superstar in his hands, and I think it's important that he gets the background noise out of his ears, because every media station, everywhere he goes, a bit like Ben Whittaker, but for different reasons, are going, this kid's next world champion, this kid's next world champion, and I think it must be quite distracting. But that's the nature of the beast. Talking about weight classes and divisions, and one that's going to be obviously very close to your heart is the cruiserweight division. I want to talk to you, because you're here, about Jai Opetaia. and what you think of him as a fighter. Well, I've had him in the studio and sat with him. He's got that dead eye look across the table at you that tells you that if he doesn't like something, he's going to look at you in a certain way. But also, he's at a level that I think is one of the best cruiserweights I've ever seen, with all due respect to present company. And I'm interested to see what you think of him. Obviously, he's dismantled pretty much everyone he's been in with. And I think some of the levels that he's been in with, I think Jordan Thompson doesn't give you a true reflection. Yeah. I think other fighters that have been in there, with all due respect to Jack Massey, I don't think they're at his level. So he looks like a Rolls Royce. He looks like it. But you know what a cruiserweight looks like. You know what they should be like. What's your view on it?
I think currently he's the best cruiserweight in the world. I think we are because of the level of his opponents. You think, oh my God, this guy's outstanding. But then I can remember when he boxed, was it Maris Bradis? He boxed him twice. He boxed him twice. So and
a very similar outcome both times.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And so the shine, the buff, it had kind of come off towards the back end of it. I thought, this kid's not as good as we all think.
Would you have fancied it back in the day?
But he's actually very good. You know what? He'd be a complete and utter nightmare. And you would fancy it because this kid's on his toes. He's constantly making you work under pressure. He's constantly making him work when he's not actually working. He's probably the cleverest out of all the cruiserweights that are out there right now. To me, he's top of the hill when it comes to the cruiserweight division. To step up to heavyweight, I don't think he can do that. I think he's probably too small for that. I know there was rumours of Usyk dropping down to fight.
No, that's nonsense, isn't it?
That's never happened. There's not enough money in it.
Where do you think? I mean, obviously there's this big ideal in the cruiserweight division that you're going to unify. You've got Zerda Ramirez. He's got to have a mandatory against Dorticus. Mm-hmm. But when you look at that fight, I think you were not hugely, I think you were critical of Ramirez.
I was, without a doubt.
Despite the fact he beat Crispin Smith for 11 rounds, you looked at it and went, well, he ain't that special.
He's not that special, but neither is Chris.
Right.
Chris is a nice kid.
Yeah.
And Chris, I think that was the softest touch to unify titles for Chris. And I thought, you've got this, man. Yeah. This guy's beatable. And Chris
in
actually...
the first round, it certainly looked like it,
didn't it? And Chris actually give this guy a chance that he shouldn't have had. So Ramirez, all of a sudden, so don't get gassed. He will get absolutely caned. He will get absolutely caned by Opetaia because he's predictably warms into the fight. Yeah. He fights like he doesn't want it, and all of a sudden he fancies it. Yeah. Then all of a sudden he's a nightmare. Opetaia will have his number left, right, and centre. I think he's the best out of the lot of them.
Why do you say absolutely not for Jai Opetaia to step up from cruiserweight to heavyweight? Simply because of size? I mean, how much smaller is he than David Haye? How much smaller is he than Evander Holyfield? And obviously the most recent example being Alexander Usyk.
I get that, but it's styles and size, size and style. And that style that is a very active, energetic style. So if he's going to put the weight on to step up, he's not going to be able to maintain that style that he's got. Yeah. He's not going to be able to maintain it, so therefore he's got to adapt. So he's going to be a little more flat-footed, so therefore he's going to be easier to hit by the bigger guys. And you've got to look at the landscape that's around him. And so if the landscape around him is weak, you could say you could put him up there. But I think heavyweight, I'd be surprised. I would be.
But he won't be in the land of the giants, though, will he? I mean, ultimately, if he steps up in a couple of years' time, 18 months' time, after he's unified this division, right? Fury will be gone probably.
Mm-hmm. Well, the next generation will be Moses Itauma coming through, and he's actually a small guy. So when you look at sizes and comparisons there, you go, well. Perhaps there's something.
It's the only way he gets paid.
Opetaia to do something at heavyweight.
It's the only way he gets paid, isn't it?
Exactly. That's where the real money is, and that's where the real. And he'll look at that, or he'll look at who's around, and he'll look at. Can you imagine putting him in with Daniel Dubois? You know what I mean? So his style is there, but the strength of natural strength of Daniel Dubois, or the unorthodox style of Bakole.
Bakole, yeah.
You'd think, would I really want to do that? So you can see where the limitations are. Let's see how he grows in the next few months.
So just for a moment, sticking with the cruiserweights, where does it leave Chris Billam-Smith and Richard Riakporhe?
Fighting for the wooden spoon. I think Richard Riakporhe, I think we wanted him to win more than he wanted him to win, because after losing to Chris Billam-Smith, you know, I'm looking, thinking, where's the hunger, where's the desperation? And I said before the Chris Billam-Smith fight, I know Richard Riakporhe's got the talent, but he's just got to prove it.
Yeah.
He's just got to prove it, and I just think appetite-wise, it's not there.
Yeah.
So he'll get so far. The appetite, the fight, you could see in the fight, it's not there.
Is it appetite with Richard Riakporhe? Because I sat next to the guy that mentors all the time, and I remember watching him fighting Glowacki, and knocking him out, and he's going, "This is the change." He believes in himself now. He believes in himself.
And again, it's like going back to AJ all over again. If you believe in yourself today, believe in yourself tomorrow.
Yeah.
You can't go in there tomorrow and think, oh, I'm not really feeling it. I think the appetite is the hunger that is needed to conquer at the top. It's not there. And I love Richard. Richard's a cool guy. And all that
I
kid.
like him a lot as well.
I just think there's something missing. It's like having a cake.
Do you think it's like distractions outside of boxing? He's got
Could
this
be.
big modelling career and he
Could
does
be.
stuff in his mind maybe on other things, and you lose that little bit of hunger maybe that's needed to get you over the line into that next level.
It could make all the difference in regard to Chris Billen-Smith. Chris Billen-Smith, I think he's overachieved and he deserves everything he's
all the credit in
done.
the world, yeah.
He's deserved everything he's done, but he's overachieved, this young man. And so I just think to put him up there with these guys, I think.
You never know if you get a unified fight for an undisputed cruiserweight champion. After that, the belts are going to get scattered. So you never know if the timing of it works out. You could find Chris Billen-Smith winning a belt again because Opetaia, despite the fact that we think that he possibly shouldn't, may find himself as a heavyweight. And then what you're left with? You're left with a landscape of those superstars.
The other thing is this: Chris Billen-Smith gets hit too often, too
hard,
cleanly.
Yeah,
and
but
in our sport, it will retire him earlier than it should do.
I think, listen, when you're looking at Chris Billen-Smith, though, and you look at those ingredients we've been talking about with maybe someone like Richard Riakporhe or whatever else, you go, one thing that Chris Billen-Smith does do is he grafts, man. He works and he fights like a challenger all the time and he's hungry.
But just out of curiosity,
Shane McGuigan does a great job with
we've
it.
had him on the show, Spence. Lions in the room. Anthony Yard, he's talking about, not fighting Josh Boazzi because it's Josh Boazzi's fault. He's fighting Callum Smith now. but he's now talking about potentially being open to the idea, as was Tundi, of going up to cruiserweight. Do you like that for Anthony Yard?
It's Lions in the camp, by the way.
No.
Lions in the camp?
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
No, I don't. I think, obviously looking at his last fight, I think if you're going to take that up to cruiserweight, you're going to be on the wrong end of a shellacking. You've got to be consistent. You've got to use your skill, use your talent. Anthony Yard's a good fighter. But you can't take that kind of mentality performance up to cruiserweight. Maybe it was an off night, but put him in with an Opetaia. Opetaia will ruin it.
I think the big problem that he has is size. Size is a huge problem because, look at him, he's very short, squat, very muscular.
Yeah.
But when that jump now from light heavyweight to cruiserweight is significant.
I used to be tall at cruiserweight. Now these cruiserweights, I look up, I'm thinking, what is going on here? So Anthony Yard in that division, you know what? You might be able to chop your Billen-Smith down, but then again, you got to think you're getting in with some big units that can bang, that will put it on you.
Right, we've got the announcement that's been reverberating ad infinitum for the last 2 years, which is the Eubank Ben fight. It's good to go, April this year. Johnny, reaction to that?
We said it off camera. I'm going to ask you again.
Are you ask him if he's going? Are you going?
No.
I need to understand. I need to understand the position. I need to understand the position of the British Boxing Board of Control. I've not heard anything, and so if they write it off, say sign it off, there you go. So what does that mean? What is that telling us? What is their explanation for this? Because again, it's just pushing things under the carpet. I rate Conor Benn. I think this guy was probably one of the most talented, fast improving fighters we've ever got going. But if you're going to do a rule, make sure the rule exists and explain to people what's going on. What is happening? What's the Boxing Board of Control saying?
I think they're quite clear, aren't they? I think they are not in a position, if he applies for a British Boxing Board of Control licence, not to give it. And so as a result of that, they'll give him the licence. And whatever people think about it, and people will run around, without us seeming like we're obsessed, they'll run around and say that he's been cleared. I think that he's being allowed to fight. Being allowed to fight and being cleared are two different things.
Yeah.
Even Eddie, at his most obtuse, playing hide and seek with himself, knows that there's not been an answer to 2 failed drugs tests. The gift is Conor's to be able to release the findings. They keep on hiding behind confidentiality. We've all now discovered that if you want to, Conor can give permission for the findings to be put into the public domain. I suspect he doesn't want to do that because it won't give you quite the exoneration. But we now have the fight and all that goes with it. When you look at that fight, put aside the principles and the British Boxing Board of Control will need to learn lessons. I suspect they've been let down by UKAD. I suspect they need to tighten their rules up and have better governance, and I'm sure Robert Smith will have that vantage point and learn some lessons from it, because I don't think he'll feel that it was handled the way it should have been.
But now they've set precedent, because what stopped this from happening again?
Well, but precedents are as good as the legislation that you put in place. So if they change the legislation and they change the amount of governance, then that precedent will become irrelevant to some extent, because the governance will supersede it. But when we think about the fight, irrespective of what the objections might be, I'm not going to go, irrespective of being invited by Turki Alalshikh, because it makes me a hypocrite. I've been sitting there saying I don't like this fight. I don't like it for Conor Benn. I don't think it. The only interest for me is the lineage of their parents, and I don't think that should be the blueprint for a fight. I understand the tourist and the casual fan wanting to watch it. I'm not going to go watch it. But when you look at the fight, who do you think wins this fight, Johnny?
Initially, I would have said Conor Benn, because of his aggressive style. I think looking at Chris Eubank, I think his style is, you've got to be busier to fight Conor, because otherwise Conor's going to find you. The problem is Conor's not been consistent enough to put on a performance that's going to realistically put Chris under pressure. So again, it makes this fight so even. It's so even because you can see one and win over other. You look at styles, you think Conor would do him. But Chris, the naturally bigger fighter, the one that's been more consistent in his career, common sense would tell you to lean towards that.
Even though we saw Chris getting beat by Liam Smith.
But you know what? The fact that Chris has been busier, he's been out there, he's performed publicly. We've seen him get turned over, then turned it back round. Conor, we haven't seen any chinks in the armour. We've just seen him improve massively. My worries for him is the fact that he's been inactive. And so he's coming in on a big stage. So he's got to hope, after all this time of inactivity, he produces an A-class performance.
It's a needs must as well, isn't it? Because I don't know if you agree with this, Johnny. If Conor Benn loses, he has, despite the pride of the family name, he has the ability to cite the fact he's gone up 2 weight classes and he can go back down to 147.
Yeah.
If Chris Eubank loses this, he goes nowhere.
Nowhere to go.
It's career over. There's a lot on the line for Chris Eubank Jr. because it's his weight division. And I think that they've been very clever matchrooming or people involved in putting this fight together, because they've got the rehydration clause in there. And I think as Chris is getting older, there's no secret that he struggles to make 160. So making that weight and the rehydration clause and all of that involved is it's a real 50-50, because Conor is coming up. Yes, he's stronger. Inactivity doesn't go in his favour. But we just don't know where Eubank Jr. is in his career yet. That margin slower than what he used to be may be the difference.
Needing dough, it would seem.
Well, that might be the key motivator with in this fight for Chris. But I'll go to it. I'll definitely go and watch it. I know.
No, I understand it.
Yeah,
I understand it.
I'll definitely go and watch it because I think
we'll have him there, mate. He'll come.
Regardless if it was in the York Hall, I'd go and watch this fight because I think it's a good. It's a
fight spectacle.
To watch, yeah.
It's a spectacle. Right, fellas, that's it for episode 104 of Talk Boxing. Spencer, thank you. Johnny, lovely to see you. And we'll see you guys next time we're out.